This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, Season 11, Episode 13. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network, brought to you by HK. This evening, it is Thursday, April 17th, as of recording of this episode, and I am your host, Riley Bowman, and I'm joined this evening by a special guest and honorary co-host of this episode, and actually host of his own podcast, the Firearm Trainers Podcast. That is Rob Beckman. Hello, sir.
Thank you for having me on. Glad to be here.
Always a pleasure. It's been too long. I've known Rob for a good number of years now. I guess better part of a decade. And
been over 10 years now.
Yeah, right. And been on your podcast, and you've been on ours, here and there, but it's been too long. So
long history behind us. That's for sure.
No. Well, it's a pleasure this evening, and I say this evening because normally we Jacob and I are doing the podcast or whatever. We record in the middle of the day because it's our work day, but we're doing it this evening for Rob's schedule, and we're going to be talking about 10 tips for firearm trainers. And so looking forward to, I know that Rob's lined up some stuff for us. Rob's an experienced instructor, has been doing it a long time, is well respected in that regard. And so really looking forward to hearing what he has for us. I expect to get some tips from you this evening, man. So,
well, I think, I've been teaching now for 16 years, firearm training. Yeah. And we've been doing the podcast for 6 years. And I've had on a lot of guests that, similar like you have, I take things away from them when they're on, and I say, okay, that's going to be a note. I'm going to try that next time I'm teaching a class. So I think I've got 10 that'll really, help people kind of frame things, because it'll work good for firearm instructors or just for the person who is doing a little bit of practicing on the side or helping, a family member know things. And some of these things are important and easily overlooked when you're trying to teach somebody, firearms.
Absolutely. Awesome. Good stuff, man. But before we get into that, first of all, this episode is sponsored by FTA, also known as the Firearm Trainers Association. Website is ftaprotect.com. I'm pretty sure you're a member because they sponsor your podcast. And I've been a member of FTA now for I don't know how many years, but this is frankly, if you're whether you're a seasoned instructor or just a budding little newbie just getting into it, you're going to need some coverage, some liability coverage for you as an instructor. And I think the best plan out there is available from FTA. Pretty non-restrictive. They cover just about anything, including even if you're doing force on force and things like that. I know that was something that was important to us looking for, Jacob and I looking for insurance type coverage for us as instructors, because there are some that won't even, cover some of those things, and others will do it, but they'll put a rider on and it costs you extra money. And I'll just tell you, the FDA membership is easy to get set up. You can sign up tomorrow and have it, active almost immediately. And it's very affordably priced, very reasonably priced. I think, probably I've been on like 2 or 3 other insurances as an instructor. FTA is the least expensive that I've had, and covers all the things I need, and they're easy to deal with. If you need a certificate for a range you're going to go teach at or something like that, for additional insured, easy peasy. I send a message to the team over there, and it's usually in my hands within minutes at no additional cost. So check out FTA. Consider becoming a member if you're not already. Firearm Trainers Association by going to ftaprotect.com. And today's other episode sponsor is the Barrel Block Instructor Bundle that we sell on concealedcarry.com. The link is in the show notes of today's episode. It's a little bit long because I didn't bother to create a short link for this, but you can also go to concealedcarry.com/product/barrel block instructor bundle. That'll get you there. Or you can just search for it on our site, the Barrel Block Instructor Bundle, and you'll find it that way. It's gives you one of each of the most common calibers of barrel block. So that's handy to have as an instructor. So if you'd like to use a barrel block in, for dry fire portions of instruction you're doing. I mean, I'll tell you one way it's really handy is if you work with new shooters and you want them to be able to practice some things dry. I mean, some instructors will start, shooters on even some cases a blue gun or maybe a SIRT pistol, which is a good option too. But maybe you want them to do something with their gun that they brought and are training with, and you can barrel block it and make it essentially an inert training gun for the purpose of that part of your instruction. Put a barrel block in, make things uber safe for you as an instructor, for the student, and still allow them to manipulate and go through all the motions of whatever you're teaching. But I also use it in more experienced level classes too, because it's, we can do some things that maybe we can't do in other contexts by just using a barrel block. So check it out. Go to concealedcarry.com and find the barrel block instructor bundle. It basically also, I think, gives you a little bit of a discount off the product. It retails for $53.99, which saves, I think, a couple of bucks if you instead of buying each of these individually. So there you go. That's our sponsors of the episode. Let's get into it. Rob, what's your first tip if you want to start right there?
Yeah. First one, I don't have these in any particular order, but the biggest one, and I bring this from the years of experience I've been teaching other instructors to be it. And one thing I always tell them is train themselves. And what I mean by that is it's really easy when you go out and you get NRA certified or get USCCA certified. You've got the course curriculum right there in front of you. You got to realize that that is as of a specific date. Things have changed. The industry has moved on. Things like your red dots. I mean, when I first got in 16 years ago, red dots were nowhere near where they are today. For when you're going along looking at something like self-defense, the going along using pepper spray was not a big deal. Nowadays, you've got areas where you can't carry, but then you still want to be safe, want to have some way to defend yourself. Pepper spray is one of those. Even the use of lights. We had weapon mounted lights before. They were good, but now today we've got really good handheld lights. They're not just 100 or 200 lumens. They're 500, maybe 1,000 lumens that we can carry, rechargeable. And what I tell people is go get the experience, but then also don't forget about training yourself, because we can get so caught up in training everybody else that the industry keeps moving past us, and we want to go along, give our students the best information possible we have. And that means we've got to go to, NRA shows. We got to go to SHOT Show. We got to go to even local shows to see what the new equipment is. Try it out sometime. Invest in ourselves. So when somebody does show up to our class with one of those new whiz bang gadgets, that we can go along and say, yes, we saw that. I've taken a class doing that. And here's 2 or 3 things that you need to know. It's going to be different than whatever everybody else has got to do.
Yeah. I'm glad you started there, man. That's one of my favorite pieces of advice for a new instructor, or any instructor for that matter, because I mean, that's I guess a danger. I don't know if that's right, the best word, but that's a danger as well for even experienced instructors. You've been in the game for a long time, and maybe you get a little tired of having to go out and do some training yourself, but it's important because you're right. The world keeps moving and marching forward. Technology keeps changing. But even best practices and to some degree techniques, and by that I mean we've seen techniques change as far as what is kind of preferred, I guess, amongst top instructors. And you don't want to find yourself being dated and providing dated information to your students. I don't know about you, Rob, but and if you want to share some of your own personal anecdotes, that'd be great. But I was recently reviewing my kind of personal CV, if you will, my history of training and background and education and stuff in this particular field, and was kind of like, oh man, I'd forgotten about some of the classes I'd taken. I mean, you see some certificates above me, and the only reason those are up there is like it's not for anybody to look at and be like, ooh, wow. But those were some that were special to me at the time, and I didn't have anywhere else to put them. I was like, oh, I'll just stick them on the wall. There's even some over here that you can't see. Well, my NRA one is up there as well. But which the NRA certificate's not. I mean, like I've done a lot since I got that thing. I've moved on from that. You could say in a lot of respects, but that's the first thing I did that. Where I became an instructor, and I kind of honor that. But I was like, man, I've done hundreds of hours of training, not just instructor classes, but classes that I took just as a student, just to go and train with, like say a Scott Jedlinski to, hey, he's kind of the recognized industry expert for red dot pistol courses. Went and took, I've trained with him a couple of times actually, and trained with Dave Spalding a few times before
Mm-hmm.
he retired and got out of the game because he was well regarded for things more on the tactical side, defensive shooting and combatives training. Well, not like hand to hand combatives, but handgun combatives. That's his company, right? And others. They're well respected and in many disciplines, competition side, defensive side, and just wanted to expand my own understanding and expertise. And so it's super important. I'm really glad you shared that as like the kind of starting place. I think it sets the tone for instructors. Like that's a perfect tip, is make sure that you're staying up to date on things and training yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The next one I have is kind of in the same line, but it's to stay current with the equipment that's out there.
Yeah.
And what I've seen during my time 20 years ago when I started getting into the industry as far as concealed carry license and everything, there were still quite a few revolvers around. We had people that were going to semi-automatics. Glock was one of the big ones, but you had people shooting SIGs that were double action, single action, DASA type of guns. Things have changed. I have not had a person in the last 5 years come in with a DASA type of gun. They're still good, but at the same time, as things progress forward, we need to be aware of how things are changing, because as firearm instructors, we've got to be able to help out that revolver shooter who's going to be shooting a 38 special, but we also have to go along and be able to help that person who's coming in with a brand new, SIG 360 P365, because that's what they've got, and it all depends on what they like. And there's lots and lots of examples where things have changed. Things, something, especially from a firearm perspective, they're all shoot, they all go bang. But at the same time, there's a lot of changes that happen, as the industry moves forward with it. Every year there's a manufacturer comes out with a new model. Glock used to be a double stack only. Now they've got their whole 42, 43, 48 lines of single stack. Again, how does that work? How do the new revitalization of the snubby nose revolver, how does that play in? Because when I started, snubby nose revolvers, yeah, they really weren't a big thing. But I've had to come back just in the last couple of years and do additional research to say, okay, if somebody comes in with a snubby nose revolver, here's the pros, here's the cons to it, so I can help them be as informed as possible for a dangerous encounter they get into.
Right. What's funny about that is that's not what I was carrying earlier today, but I got home and changed clothes and then I was like, I actually didn't have a gun on me for like an hour or so, which is kind of unusual. But then I was like, oh, I'm gonna put a gun back on, and I've got a J frame revolver in my pants right now, in it's actually our new holster for KSG Armory. Not that this is supposed to be a spiel about that, but we just released our Saratoga holster from KSG Armory, which is our revolver specific model of holster. And I've been, over the last couple of months, been making sure I test that a fair bit. And so that's what I'm carrying right now. And I started experimenting with revolvers because there has kind of started to be this little bit of resurgence, or the little bit of an increased interest, because for a while things just went dead. I didn't see a revolver for like ever. But we had somebody at our Guardian conference a year or two ago that showed up with a revolver, for a 3-day shooting conference. And I was like, dang, that's hardcore, man. Because it's more work, frankly, for the shooter, but he was committed to shooting that thing. And like, that's cool. Well, me, I was not super well versed with, like, I understand how a revolver operates, and I've certainly shot them over the years, but I was like, I should probably put a little more effort into that. So the next time I have a student that's running a revolver, I can be a little bit more of a help to them, maybe in some cases. So, and you're talking about, hey, be familiar with the equipment. We talked a little bit about red dots. You mentioned that earlier. That's become kind of the thing. Like, you walk into a gun shop now, and so many guns even just come, with an optic on them, right? So like that's important to recognize, because that's what people are if that's the case, then that's what people are buying, and that's what you're going to see showing up on your range. But in the last decade, we've seen, I agree, there was a time where I'd see more DASA guns. I mean, maybe not more than striker fired necessarily, but they were pretty common. I still see, usually if I see one now, though, it's not usually a SIG, like a classic line SIG. It's usually a Beretta 92.
Mm-hmm.
And usually it's a more discerning user that's maybe had their gun worked over by Langdon Tactical or something, and they're running a Beretta 92. But that's not very common. It's kind of a striker fired world, except in the last couple of years, we've started to see some people move more to 2011 or double stack 1911 style pistols. Right. That's probably kind of like the next thing. It's like, whoa, hey, that's a little bit of a shift in the market, and more people are showing up at the Guardian conference. More people are coming. Like almost all of my pistol intelligence classes I teach now, I usually have at least one or two that are running a 2011, a Staccato or something like that. And so that's you got to stay up to speed on the equipment and what people are using, for sure. That's another good tip.
Yeah, and with your 1911, 2011 style, you've got an external safety that you've got to be able to put on when you're off target, take it off when you are on target. Work that into your draw. So there's specific things you need to know and realize, and also what are the pros and cons behind it? Because I know I like shooting my 1911 because it's a heavier gun. I can shoot a 45 ACP out of it very comfortably with no problem at all, versus sometimes even the recoil coming out of a 9mm and the Glock being that it's got the plastic frame is more than what the 45, but the 45 is going to weigh twice as much as what the Glock does, and that's just one of those pros and cons depending upon who the shooter is, especially if you've got a new shooter. They might want to know, okay, is it best to get the smallest gun possible, or do you get something middle of the road, and what are the pros and cons between having a plastic frame versus a metal frame? The Smith & Wesson with their M&P line a couple years ago came out with an all steel line for it. They're still M&Ps, but they've taken, instead of being an all polymer frame, they turned it into a metal frame to give it more rigidity and more weight there. And that's where staying up with the equipment, you don't necessarily have to buy it all the time, but you've got to go in the gun store every once in a while, check things out, read some trade magazines, go to some shows, and just be knowledgeable, because you are no matter how many years you've been teaching, your students are going to look at you like a guru. You're going to know everything, and the advice you give them is going to hold more weight than even the people at the gun shop a lot of times. And that's where I always want to make sure that I'm up to speed and give them good recommendations for it.
Yeah. By the way, folks that are with us live viewing tonight, I apologize. I missed seeing some of the comments come in. And Frank says, "I just love concealed carry." Thanks, Frank. Joseph gives us the American flag, U.S. flag. That's very nice, very patriotic. And Steve, hello everyone. Hello, Steve. Thanks for joining us live, folks. I was just thinking too. Another thing, Rob, is being familiar with other, like we just kind of focused more on guns and things, but holsters and concealed carry belts, especially if you're concealed carry focused. Like what are some of the latest and greatest products, some of the evolutions that have happened? I mean, what about the Filster Enigma, and how that plays into the role of concealment and how it works with a holster and things like that. I mean, these are there's been quite a bit of evolution in the last few years in that regard, just with holsters and belts and different ways of carrying a gun. So yeah,
we've had seen the Kydex revolution over the last 10 years. Prior to that was all leather, and we've actually seen some people kind of meld the two together. Crossbreed is one that does leather slash Kydex
hybrid
type
holsters.
And then you've got the KSG Armory, where you've got more appendix carry and such, which is again a different style to where one size doesn't fit all, and you'll have some people that have the right body shape where they can do appendix carry. Other people are going to prefer leather. Other people are going to want other types of holsters depending upon how they're carrying, where they're carrying, and even what kind of gun they have. I mean, you probably have got a couple dozen holsters just like I do, because I've got ones for all my different models of guns and for different carry at different times of the year.
Yeah, you want to see some irony, Rob? This is a pattern or color we don't offer on KSG Army's website, but I'm carrying the J-frame revolver in a Kydex holster that has leather looking texture to it. It's like an insult to leather. Like, hey, I'm going to make it look like leather, but it's not leather. Anyway,
there you go.
It's crazy too. Like, not that it's super relevant, I don't think, to an instructor necessarily, but there's so many colors and patterns and textures and things in the Kydex and Bolteron, which is another type of material, and also a material called Holstex. Those are kind of the three main rigid plastics that are thermoplastics that are used in holster production. There's so many variations now. For a long time, it was pretty limited, and now you can get all kinds of things. Anyway, good stuff. Hey, before we get too much further along, I've actually meant to do this earlier in the episode, but you're going to be doing something kind of cool at the NRA show here coming up real quick. Maybe you might take a minute and just talk about that and see if folks want to hook up with you at the NRA.
Yeah,
not hook up in you on the hookup sort of way, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, stop by. Yeah, I was very honored. Last month was asked to be an inaugural event at the NRA. It's called the Voices of the Second Amendment, and what that's going to be is they're going to have an area on the show floor. I believe it's between booth 600 and 680, something around there. They got about 10 booths where there's going to be approximately 20 different social media people. I don't know if I want to be a social influencer, but they're the people that do podcasts, the people that do YouTube videos, cross section of people that are big 2A supporters. So I was honored myself for it, and we're going to be there on Friday from 3 to 6, on Saturday from 12 to 3, and on Sunday from 9 to 12, going along. And we're going to be recording podcasts. We've been lining up guests, and we'll have some swag that people want to stop by and grab some stuff. They can take it, but it's to go along and give people more exposure. The NRA, as you could probably imagine, doesn't get the best press when it comes to the mainstream media. So the NRA this year is going along and saying, okay, instead of trying to impress the mainstream media and control the message that way, why don't they get the people that are currently, pro 2A, and they've got message out there. And quite honestly, a lot of people are listening to these days versus the mainstream media and start embracing them a little bit more. So this is inaugural convention for it, and if it goes well, they're planning on keeping it going for the next umpteen years to keep the engagement up.
Yeah, so the Voices of the 2A, you'll be there broadcasting or podcasting, and folks, if you're going to be at the NRA show, the NRA annual meetings and exhibits, which is not this coming weekend. I mean, actually, as people listen to this, it may be this weekend, because
24th, 25th, 26th, and 27th.
Yeah, of April, in Atlanta. So stop on by if you're in or near Atlanta or planning on traveling to the show, and say hello to Rob. Like he said, somewhere in the 600 to 680 booths. There'll be several in a row there, like he said. And stop by and say hello.
We'll be booth 660. I know that for sure.
Oh, okay. 660. Cool. Good to know. Put out the word so people know where to find you. So very cool. Excited for you to have that opportunity, Rob.
It's gonna be fun. You'll see me smiling probably in a whole convention, because it's not everybody got asked, and to be the inaugural one, that's very special.
Awesome.
Very honored for that.
Fantastic. Next tip, third tip. What do we got?
Here's a really important one that I tell instructors that they've got to learn, kind of through experience, but both teaching and also personal. But they got to teach the students where they are. And what talk about that is Riley and I, we've trained together before. We shoot really well. Riley shoots extremely well, but you can't go into a beginning class and necessarily expect everybody to go along and shoot the same level that you are. You've got to go along and be able to assess. If you've got 8 people in your class, there might be 2 people that are very good pistol handling, 2 people that are completely brand new pistol handling, and the other 4 are somewhere in between there. And you've got to meet the people where they're at, because if you go along and tell people, it's like, I want you to go faster, without giving them the coaching on how to go faster, that's a recipe for disaster. And that's where you want to make sure people can absorb what they're being taught and also put it in practice at the same time. That's where knowing where your students are, to meet them there, and as an instructor, be able to help all the different levels of students that show up for a class, because you don't go and get one level of students every time. Even in advanced classes, I found you'll find people that are super advanced and people that are mediocre advanced, but you still got to go along and teach and make sure everybody's getting what they need out of the class.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice as well. That's something that took me a while, I think, to figure out. As a brand new instructor years and years ago, because as instructors, we got to, we're learning as we go along a lot of times too. And yeah, it would be easy if everybody you were teaching in a class were on the same level, for sure. Like that would be easy. What I'm often faced with now is, as I go, especially out on the road and teach my pistol intelligence class, which has kind of become my new, signature class, which I've really enjoyed putting that curriculum together and teaching it, and people have really loved it. But it's challenging because it's a type of class. It's not like, well, this is pistol 101 and pistol 201 and pistol 301, or, whatever, like where it's like more obvious that there's like different levels and sort of a progression to a curriculum. Mine is intended for just about anybody. Now I do tell in the description, like, this is not for beginners, but yet I still get some folks that sign up that are pretty close to being beginners. And I'm not going to, shun them or turn them away, because the day of they show up to a class and it's like, oh, okay, well, we're going to work with you no matter what, and so it presents a unique challenge for us as instructors to work with students of different levels. And figuring that actually has been a huge, I guess, blessing for me as an instructor, is having that opportunity to I guess be faced with that challenge. It really challenges your skills as an instructor, and also causes you to kind of go back and sometimes review your curriculum and go, hey, while I intend to maybe teach students of a little bit higher experience at times, I may need to explain things in a way, or be prepared to explain things in a way that can be adapted to, because if I talk up here, it's just going to go over the, someone of a lower skill or knowledge level, it's just going to go over their head, and that's no good. But meeting people where they're at, and I would say both in terms of what you're teaching, the content, but also emotionally, is really important as well. And that's a whole other probably can of worms that could be opened up, is talking about that a little bit. And I don't know that you want to do that here tonight, but that's been something I've been trying to work on in more recent years as an instructor, is trying to gauge where people are at more on an emotional level, and meeting them where they are there. Because if they are not in the best place emotionally, and I know this to some of you listening, this may be kind of strange sounding, but I mean, if somebody is really stressed out, or anxious, or whatever, or maybe I said something in a class that just triggered somebody, just reminded them of a bad or negative experience they had, it could put them in a place that then is going to take away from their ability to learn. And so really being more in tune with students with where they're at emotionally is, I guess, what I'm saying is I'd put that in that same category of meeting students where they are.
Yeah, I would definitely agree, because as the instructor, if in a classroom, you're in front of them, you can see how their heads are nodding, you can see where their eyes are. When you're on the range, you're going walking from one to the other, seeing what they're doing, how they're holding. You get a up close feeling of just what they're doing. And I'll relate a quick story. In one of the classes I was teaching several years ago, I made somebody cry.
Yeah,
and
I've seen that too.
Here's the situation behind it. Wasn't anything, I wasn't yelling at them or doing anything else like that. We were talking about security and situational awareness around an ATM. When you go in there and you're staring at a screen, somebody can walk up behind you. You want to be situational aware. Why did I start seeing tears coming out of this guy's eyes? And it's like, I think we need to take a break real fast. I talked to him and found out that his first wife was murdered at an ATM. There's no way in the world I would have known that. But you've got to have that situational awareness to go along and give them a break. He wasn't going to be processing anything else for what that I was saying until he got that out of his mind at that point. And that's one of the big things when it comes to the mental side of teaching is you've got to realize when you've overloaded the students and also when there's more room to push them harder. You by the end of a good class, the students that you can say, okay, go up there. I want you to try even harder than what you just did. Give me 110%, because once they figure out when they've gone too far, they can always measure back. But if they're not pushing themselves all the way, then as an instructor, you can go, I think you can do a little bit quicker. I think you can do better. This time try this, and give them those little coaching tips where all of a sudden they're like, I had no idea, I could do something that fast.
Yep. Man, what a humbling, but also that's a perfect example of what I was just talking about, that example of your student that had that horrible experience involving an ATM. I've been there too with those kinds of stories where you don't know what background somebody has or what they've experienced. And all of a sudden they are right back there in that moment. And that's traumatic. Now, on the flip side, I've had students that have cried and broken down because I'm asking them to do something that's not easy, and I'm not trying to push them, but sometimes what it is they just want to do well, and they came prepared to try to do their best, and they're so overly anxious about doing well. Like I had a student that literally told me, they're like, I just wanted to do well in front of you. They, there was this kind of, they knew me ahead of time, like kind of virtually. They've been listening to the podcast and watched training videos I put out and things. And we hadn't actually met in person yet, but they're like, I just feel like I know you, and I just wanted to do well, in front of you. They just had built up this anxiousness, this nervousness, this and then they kind of fell apart as I was asking them to shoot a shooting test, a qualification of sorts, and they broke down because it didn't go well. So I've seen the whole spectrum as far as that goes. Good stuff.
You're almost being like a junior psychologist sometimes when you're going along talking to people, hearing what they're saying, and then also trying to apply it and say, okay, do you push them more? Do you pull them back? Do you help them get their head in a good space? When I do qualification shoots for their instructor certifications, there's certain things that they've got to shoot, but there's also a lot of room there to where I will purposely go along and force them to get their head out of throwing a shot, because if they keep worrying about the shot they just missed, guess what? Next shot's going to miss too. But if they get their head back into doing the basics of what I know they can do, then they can pass the qualifications, because it's not what I know. It's they've got to perform at that point for the qualifications. And sometimes they look at me kind of silly, but it's there's some tips and tricks that you can go do with a student to make them perform better. And part of that is not push them too hard, but also knowing when to push them.
Yep. Good stuff. All right, next tip.
Next one, instructors, stay in your lane. There's a lot of people that want to go out there and teach on something. They've seen the YouTube videos, and now they want to go along and they want to run and dive and be able to shoot and drop one gun and pick up another gun and make it look like a tactical scene that they've seen in the movies before. The thing about that is stay in your lane. Those kind of situations, if you know how to shoot a handgun, good. If you want to go along and start shooting long guns, get the training so you can do it properly. Same thing when it comes to hand-to-hand combat or different things along those lines. Know where your lane is. Every once in a while I have police officers that will come and want to take a class strictly because they want to go along and shoot better. And I tell them, hey, I can help you. I can show you how to work the trigger. I can go along and show you how to present it effectively. But when it comes to your actual tactics that you're using as a police officer, that's outside my wheelhouse. I don't go along and teach those types of tactics for it, because that's all based upon your department and based upon things that I haven't actually gone through. And, making sure that you aren't trying to, do too much. Could I go along, watch a couple videos, and then have tell the police officers to do this? I could. But if I don't know that material inside and out, and when you wouldn't do something like that, then I'm setting them up for failure, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah, that's another thing that took me a little while to figure out. When you're sometimes just beginning, you don't even know what your lane is for some of us. And sometimes, like, I mean, I've seen even some that come out of like the law enforcement profession or the military profession, and they know a lot of stuff. They've experienced and seen and done a lot of things, been there, done that sort of things. But even that, like, that can be tricky and almost misleading to the individual. Like, it's very easy to be like, well, I was a cop for 25 years, and like, what don't I know about tactics? I'll tell you, there's probably a lot that you still don't know. I'm not going to say you don't. I'm not going to call a person out on that. But for me, there's things that I used to teach, I don't teach anymore. And it's not because I can't teach them and teach them well, if I'm being honest. But I look at the industry, if you will, my fellow instructors, and I go, there's a ton of guys and gals out there that can teach that thing better than I can, because of their background, because of their experience. It's not that I can't, but there's a lot that are out there doing it and that do it really well. And so I've made the choice. Like, I just look at that and I go, that's not my lane. What is my lane? And that's something I had to, like, really address in a very personally honest way about 5 or so years ago, maybe 6 years ago even. I started kind of like having this wake up of like, oh, like, what is the Riley Bowman, specialty? Like, what is really my lane? And that was a good opportunity for me to step back and sort of reevaluate. And I made the choice to do some things differently for me as an instructor. And that's kind of where actually the pistol intelligence curriculum came about for me, was me sort of revamping myself as an instructor to be like, this is a class I'm going to teach that is totally and completely in my lane, you know? And I'll tell you, it's helped me a lot as an instructor and improved my confidence as an instructor, because I know, like, that's where I live and that's where I thrive, and that's what I can help my students learn, because, like, that is my lane. Whereas there were times in the past that I taught things that, again, I was good at teaching them, but I didn't have that same degree of confidence because, I haven't spent a lot of time doing building clearing, for instance. Like, I understand a lot of the principles and I can teach it to some extent. I'm not going to say I could teach all the things, but yeah, that is definitely outside my lane.
Yeah, one of the things when I get new instructors that I'm teaching over on the concealed carry side, those instructors, and when they come from law enforcement, coming from the military, I've got to caution them to make sure they also realize that when you're teaching a civilian, concealed carry, you can't go, running in there, or, from a police officer standpoint, and confront somebody with the intention of arresting them, because you have no arrest powers for it. Right. Same thing with the military. You can't go along and, basically, call in support, air support behind you, or go along and shoot them all type of thing. You've got to go along and have articulable reason for why you went along and first threatened them with your gun, and second of all, if you discharge your gun, why you discharged it. But those are things that have to be conscious decisions for a civilian to be able to go along and justify their actions. And sometimes that's one of the things where, as I talk to them, the light bulbs go off. It's like, oh wow, yeah, that is right. I need to tell people differently than, if you see somebody, robbing, a store, do you run in there right away, or do you wait and be a good witness? And those are all things that, from a concealed carry standpoint, you can have a lot of discussion about. That's going to be different than if you're a police officer. It's going to be different than if you are military and you're in a war zone, those types of things. And that's where, again, where you've got to understand where your lane is. And if you want to expand your lane, get the training that you deserve and what your students deserve to make sure that you're giving them the best information possible.
Agreed. Excellent advice.
Yeah. Well, here's another one that kind of ties into what we were just talking about: understanding adult learning. And what I mean by that, and I think 16 years ago when I started teaching, I didn't know what I didn't know. Because now I know that the words I choose to describe things are very important, because I'm teaching a generation that is 18 years old all the way up to 80 years old. And the words are going to be very important for how I go along and describe things for them. I might have to use multiple ways of engaging those people, but you want the communication to be clear, and you also want to make it engaging, because the 70, 80-year-old generation, they've got one set of expectation. They didn't go along and grow up using computers and such. They had dial phones for it. But you've got the 18 and 20-year-old generation that are all, the only thing they know is the internet and having smartphones. There was no other time in their entire lives for it. And you've got to realize that, there's going to be different attention spans. There's going to be different interests to do those. And that's where understanding adult learning, it's not specific to just firearms, but it's very important to go along and understand the words you use, how you engage it, and putting things into bite-sized, digestible for the mind context, so that they can go along and grasp it, what you're trying to teach them.
Yeah. And again, another excellent point here. And I just lost my train of thought. I had a I thought I was going to add to that. But that just went out the window. My age is beginning to show, Rob. What were we even talking about? Crap.
Well, hey, that actually comes into the next point.
Adult learning. Geez, there we go.
Adult learning, yeah.
See, isn't that ironic? We're talking about adult learning, and here I am having an adult moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'll just say that the thing that has worked really well for me is keeping things simple. And that's kind of like a little bit of a contradiction, because like on the one hand we're like, well, adults, I can understand complicated things, right? And yeah, that's true. And there's like I'll spend time explaining sometimes the why behind why we do certain things, because to some adults that's important. Like I want to they want, it's not important to everybody, but some people want to know the why behind things. But just keeping things simple is like super key. It's not because adults can't understand complicated things, but it's because that, like, as an adult learner, if you stack simple things upon themselves, it progressively sets them up for being able to do all those things in conjunction. Like adults can handle and do a lot of things, but I find it's really important to start with the building blocks and kind of be like, hey, we're going to build this together, and then we put it all together, and that's worked incredibly well for me. I would say actually a lot of the same things can be done with more junior level students as well, but that's just been kind of a sort of a guiding principle for me as an instructor, is keep it simple and don't overly complicate it, and don't give too much all at one time. Maybe it's just a general learning principle, but for me, it's worked really well with my adult students.
Our cognitive stack. We can only remember so much one time. So if I give you 5 things, to improve your grip, to align your sights better, move your feet this way, more than likely you're only going to do one of those, 3 or 4 things I give you properly, and then we'll go right back, because you're trying to do them all at the same time, and our mind's only working on one thing. And that's where doing the building blocks helps to make sure that everybody's on the same level. So when we start doing some advanced skills, that we've all had a chance to understand what it is we're trying to do and the proper way of doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Another part that really helps with that is just the basic tell, show, do kind of principle, which I try to do with everything I teach. It's like, we're going to talk about it. And that sort of helps those auditory learners and the ones that want to understand the whys and all that. And then I'm going to show them by demonstrating pretty much everything that the student's going to do. It's like, I'm going to show you right here, right now. This is how we do it. And then the visual learners are like, and then you turn it over to them. Okay, your turn. And those that really have to be hands-on, that's what they need ultimately. And for everybody else, they're taking what they heard and what they saw, and now, okay, put it together in action. And then you're right there, of course, as an instructor or a coach. Your job is, okay, watch and provide feedback and advice and coaching and guidance as they are, you're guiding them along in that process. And that just kind of brings everything around full circle. So
yeah.
Anyway.
And if you're the instructor, I'll give you a little hint. You can also pick the student that picks things up the quickest, to have them be the first one to do that skill.
Yeah.
And then it gives the other people that might take a couple more times, a little bit more time to see what's going on. So, those are some of the little tricks to where students probably don't even realize that instructors were thinking about that. But we're sitting there and trying to figure out, okay, how can I make you the best, person possible doing this exercise, not embarrass you, but to push you, but at the same time go along, make you the best possible. And sometimes that is, okay, we're gonna take and have you be the last person so you can see that's being done 5-6 times before you actually do it for it. And they appreciate it, because then they don't look foolish being the first one getting up there to where it's like, I forgot to load my magazine, or I forgot this, or forgot that.
Absolutely. That's a great tip right there. Just by itself, that's a great tip. Next up, what you got?
Psychological understandings for it.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is the stress and performance. If you go along and I see this in my concealed carry classes, where we're in the classroom for about 6 hours. We're going through the laws, going through all the different pieces of it, and people are wanting to do good. Then we get out on the range, and a lot of times this is they're going through and thinking about how well am I going to do? I want to do well. I want to be able to hit the bullseye. Those types of challenges. But you've also got to realize that stress doesn't improve our performance; it actually detracts from it. So you've got to go along and do some simple things. One of the things I go along and tell people, go along and back at the ready line, make sure people have like some water with them or something to drink, because swallowing is a natural relaxer for us. You can't stay stressed if you're swallowing. It's physiologically impossible. And that's where you go along and keep that in mind, because if you shoot 5 rounds, you got 10 round magazines, and you see people are not shooting as well as they should, maybe you need to go along and say, okay, let's holster up, go back, get some drinks. It's kind of hot out today. We need to stay hydrated. You don't have to call somebody out on it, but you give people, that 2 or 3 minutes to get a drink, and then walk back to the firing line and shoot. And all of a sudden you find out that they are shooting a lot better. And that's partly because you reduce the stress level. This is opposite than what we see in the boot camp, where you've got the boot camp instructor screaming and yelling at the soldiers to do it, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. We're trying to make it more friendly to the adult learning model, to where if we lower the stress, they'll remember it, and they'll be able to perform it better overall when they leave also, which is a really important thing when it comes to firearms. Not just that we do good in class, but that we remember that when we leave, and we can apply that in our daily lives, however we're going to use that.
So that's going to be one thing for sure I take away from this interview with you, is I did not know that swallowing can help reduce stress. I mean, I'm always focused as an instructor on, hey, we're going to have regular breaks so that you can stay hydrated from I don't want you passing out or having some other kind of medical emergency because you're dehydrated, heat exhaustion, heat stroke. They need those kinds of things. But from a stress reduction, like I understand also too, just giving breaks, at frequent enough, interval is going to help with that. But hearing from you that the act of swallowing is a benefit, that's cool. That's interesting. Very
Yes,
interesting.
sometimes instructors say, okay, we're going to take a break every hour. And I point out, it's like, okay, if you're a good instructor, you'll take a break every hour, but you'll also see when the students need a break.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
That's when you get out of the sun, you go along, get some water in them. But also, when you see their performance, the person who's been shooting really good and their shooting falls off a little bit, guess what? A nice, break probably bring the performance back. And also realize that by the time you hit that 6 to 8 hour mark of a class, especially on the range, everybody's whooped. I'm whooped as a instructor. And here's the dangerous part about that. When we're not focused on doing everything right, that's when accidents happen. And that's, again, a good time to go along, take a pause for it, work it into your schedule to where, okay, we do a whole bunch of stuff before lunch and we come back from lunch and we do it. But then when we start getting those later hours, we start slowing down and we start doing things a little bit differently to make sure that we're not forcing an error there, because people were already exhausted after training that long and somebody just forgets to do something. All these things that instructors got to keep in mind about it.
Yeah. Good stuff. Yes. Very good. And I'm really big about strategies for self-management of stress for the shooter. Like I try to teach my shooters, different strategies and ways of coping with stress, reducing stress, all of that, because that is a big factor. That is, and I know that some may be thinking, well, don't we want them to be under stress? Yes, at times there's a time and a place to place shooters or students under stress in appropriate ways, in manageable ways. 'Cause obviously, and by the way, you can go too far that way. Like you can go to the other end of the spectrum here. And I've seen some instructors that do that. I've seen some, you probably have as well. I've seen some videos, posted online on social media and stuff of things being done in classes. I'm like, whoa, like that is not safe, not okay. Like that's, it's just asking for an accident to happen first and foremost, like some kind of safety related issue. But also it's just asking too much of students. And frankly, they're just not going to get as much out of it as what you think they will, because there's just so much overwhelming stress happening. Learning does not happen well under stress. What stress is really good for is testing something that's already learned and seeing if it, how it holds up when we start adding appropriate levels of increased stress, because we do that as a test, as sort of a, hey, does this thing that we've learned and practiced and have started to figure out, does it still hold up when we put you under a little bit more stress? And if it does, great. And that's a huge confidence booster. And it shows, yes, the skill that has been learned is holding up well under stress. And now we can move on to other things. If it doesn't hold up, it's a learning opportunity of, okay, where did the breakdown occur? And that's usually a sign of, this is the area, the specific, thing that needs to be evaluated again, maybe broken down some more, and then certainly practiced and worked on more, because it's just not holding up under stress. And there's a lot of different ways of inducing stress. Even just pulling out a shot timer alone for a lot of people is like, oh, as soon as they hear that beep, oh, like the kind of classic meme I've seen, a number of times of like the shot timer sort of being compared to the neuralizer that featured in the Men in Black movies, right? Like, beep, and then like your brain just is erased, right? You forget what you're doing, you forget your stage plan, you forget the drill you're about to shoot, you forget the reload you were supposed to do, whatever, right? So just that one little thing, adding some kind of time component, can stress the heck out of people. So yes, stress is a tool that can be used in training, but it needs to be introduced appropriately at appropriate times. And then we also want to be teaching those stress management techniques and strategies that help us deal with that better. Breathing is huge. Mentally rehearsing things before we do them is huge. Science has proven that like mental rehearsals or visualization of something before you do it, when it's done really well to a high degree of detail, like mentally, whether you choose to close your eyes and like you can picture mental images, or maybe you can't do that so well, but you can look at a drill or a stage or a thing you're about to exercise or about to perform, and you can go through that step by step, like doing those kinds of things. What's cool about the science behind mental rehearsal / visualization is it not only helps, it not only is like when it's done well, it's not only equivalent to doing the thing as an actual repetition, but it's also a stress reducer. And that's really, really huge. So anyway, I could go on and on about those kinds of things. That's a big part of my curriculum.
Yep. Next one, stay up to date on laws. And what I mean by that is we're not lawyers. I know that. But at the same time, remember I talked earlier about, our students that come to us and looking at us like we're gurus, that we want to go along and be able to guide them to the proper places. If you've got to purchase a gun, do you purchase it off the guy at the corner, or do you purchase it, at the gun store? Whether, what do they look out for, for those states where you can, purchase it, do a private sale? And, things are changing. I know in Colorado, things are changing quite a bit. And that's where, being up to date on, again, you're not giving them legal advice, but you're trying to go along and point them in the right direction so that they don't get themselves in trouble. Hey, I want to let my brother, use my guns. Well, if you're in one of those, mandatory background check states, you may be required to go along and have your brother get a background check before you can go along and sell them a gun, or go along and be able to even let them use the gun, all depending upon what the law says. And that's where it becomes, very important. And probably more important is not so much knowing the law word for word, in my opinion, but understanding how case law has been applied. Andrew Bronca does a great job in going along, breaking down the case law to understand, the thousands and thousands of pages of laws down to, what does legal self-defense look like? What is the law of self-defense? And that's where, again, try to always make sure people realize you're not giving people legal advice, but you are going along and helping them, kind of navigate to figure out what should they be doing and how they should be living their lives a little bit to be on the right side of the law. Because so many times when it comes to laws, doing one thing could get you in trouble with the law. And I'm not talking about a slap on the wrist, talking about, big problem. Put a vertical forearm or on a pistol, which is illegal all of a sudden. And, you can get in big trouble, but it looks cool. It really looks cool. And the gun does the same thing. Yes, I know that, but it's against the law still. So it's those types of things that sometimes people don't even realize. I remember when a couple of years ago when people were protesting against ARs and different things, a woman on TV went along and took her AR and chopped the barrel in half. And it's like, you just committed a federal crime and that you made a short barrel rifle. Now, I'm sure, she had no intentions of doing that, but it also demonstrates and accentuates the ease of going along doing something that seems like it's very benign, but all of a sudden could end up in jail. And that's, I don't want my students ending up in jail.
That is something that we bear as a burden as instructors, is making sure, it's not only teaching safe handling of firearms and shooting, but like you just said, what are the laws and how do we stay within those? Something I take very seriously as an instructor, especially when I'm teaching concealed carry classes for permits, because let me give you an example. Okay. We just published on our website on concealedcarry.com. It's actually Jacob that published it. But we did a survey last year, and we just got around to compiling the data from this on concealed carriers that had law enforcement interactions through a traffic stop. All right. So the article on our website, you can go to concealedcarry.com and look up what over 1,600 armed traffic stops reveal about law enforcement interactions. And one of the things that was kind of surprising about this, there were several things, but this just came to my mind right now, is one of the questions on the survey was, uh, does your state require you to proactively inform the officer, or inform them that you are carrying a gun or that you're armed? Okay. Um, and there was the data about how many of these that were participating in the survey were in states that had a duty to inform law. But there was also the data that was like, there was 18% of respondents that did not know. Okay. So they just don't know whether their state requires them to inform law enforcement or not. And then we probed a little bit deeper and found that 21% of survey respondents were wrong about whether they were in a state that requires them to inform officers they are carrying or not. And
Wow.
that's not a big deal if you're in a state that doesn't have a duty to
Mm-hmm.
inform law, and you think it does, and so like you go ahead and inform, and it's like, okay, that's not a big deal. But it's a problem if you are in a duty to inform state and you don't know that, right? So that's something that we take very seriously at concealedcarry.com. I know Jacob does. I do in teaching our classes, making sure people know what is the law. I mean, we're here. Jacob and I are in Colorado. You're out in Ohio, although you
Mm-hmm.
teach students probably coming to you from Indiana and
Kentucky.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're right down there in the southwest corner of Ohio. And so like, it's important that our students know what the laws are.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And it's very friendly firearm wise here, but as I go along, point out there's certain things that you can't do in Ohio, you can do in Indiana. Same thing in Kentucky. And I'm not saying one state's better than the other, but I will tell you that if you get pulled over and you don't follow the laws right, you might end up the evening in jail, which none of us wants to do for it.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Where are we at on the list, by the way?
We're down to number 7 or 8
dang.
actually now.
Okay.
Yeah, 8.
A couple more then. I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, oh, it's been an hour. Well, okay.
Well, here's one, and I'm sure you can identify with this, Riley. But instructors have got to get out and practice. And what I mean by that is, we're going along, we're teaching classes, maybe a couple times a week. We're demonstrating a drill for them, taking a couple shots. But last night I was doing a class and realized the students shot a little over 100 rounds. I shot 20 rounds, just demonstrating things. And that's one of those things to where, it's fun pulling the trigger and showing them, but I need to make sure I get out and practice. I need to make sure I get out and dry fire. I need to make sure I get out and, work on my malfunctions for it, because there again, if I'm going to show people how to do it, going back and thinking about how my brain's processing, I'm just like a student. I've got to go along and do it and repeat it so that I can do it right every single time, especially when I'm showing students what to do. I want to make sure I can go along, move and shoot. I can go along and how can I clear malfunction? Type 1 malfunctions, type 3 malfunctions. Those are things where you're not going to always remember them if you haven't done them within the last, month or two.
Yeah. It can be challenging, especially for busy instructors, to get some time for themselves. You spend all your time teaching others and not any time working on yourself. And that is really important. I don't get to the live fire range as much as I would like to. But the one thing I have tried, and to differing degrees of success, here and there over time, but I have tried to make sure I do daily dry fire practice. And I'm a huge advocate for, just for anybody that carries a gun, to make sure you get some reps in each day. At the very least, what works really well from I think even just a general preparation standpoint, but also psychologically, I feel a bit better going out about my day when I can take a few minutes in the morning. I'm getting ready for the day. I'm going to arm myself, put my gun and holster on. If I can safely do just even 10 reps of just draw from the holster, like I love the feeling that gives me, because it's like, if I was to get into some kind of incident today, within the last few hours, probably, I've done some reps of clearing a garment, getting a grip on that gun, getting it out of the holster, getting it up on target, and getting a good sight picture. Like, and that's huge. But yeah, it could be challenging in a busy life and in day-to-day life. Like, life is busy. I get it.
Yeah.
But that's something I've tried to do on a daily basis for years now. And then I'll have people ask, how'd your draw get to be so clean and consistent? Yeah, because I've done it, thousands of times on a daily basis. You don't have to put in huge. I'm a believer that you don't have to put in huge blocks of time to make progress. If you do it frequently enough and often enough, you don't have to make this huge time commitment. And so, but the challenge there is making it a habit and making it something that you consistently, regularly do. And so if you can, like James Clear, guy that wrote the Atomic Habits book, great book, by the way. He talks about, what does he call it? But it's linking you if you're trying to create a new habit, if you can link it to something else that you already do. So that, I'll give you an example. Like, I have, they're not prescription pills. They're like daily vitamins, or what's the word, supplements that I've been taking, that in the beginning I have some that I take in the evening and some I take in the morning. And I would take the evening ones, no problem, because I'd brush my teeth at the end of the night and before bed, and then I'd take my pills and, like, no big deal. And in the morning, sometimes I would have a hard time remembering, because my morning routine is not nearly as consistent as my evening routine. And so, but one thing I do consistently is I wear contacts. And so I would I put my contacts in every morning. So I started putting my pills right next to my contacts. So what happens? I would go to the bathroom. I'm like, oh, contacts, and then right there's my pills. I'm like, oh, pills. So then all of a sudden now the pills are a habit, because I linked them together with another habit. And so and it's easy to do in the case of getting, if you carry a gun on a daily basis, well, then at some point you're going to get dressed and put your gun on. You can easily link that with the habit of, let's do 10 dry reps of drawing my gun from a holster. So anyway, just a little tip there for me, I guess.
Yep. And one thing I would add to it, most of us put different clothes on every day.
Yep.
For it, and doing those reps helps you to go along and make sure that if you're wearing a little heavier clothing because it's wintertime, or a little lighter clothing because it's spring, summertime, you can work out those type of issues ahead of time, which is important.
100%. No, I'm glad you brought that up. That's actually another, yes. And we've talked about that on the podcast before, about how that's a huge benefit of doing it with your daily. It's like, this is what I'm wearing today. Let's do a couple of dry reps. Okay, cool. I had that little hitch because, this shirt or these pants or this belt or whatever play differently with things. And then you work your way through that. And now it's fresh in your mind and freshly repetitioned. And now you're ready to go for the day. So I just really, I think I picked that up from, yeah, I'm trying to think who it was, but it's somebody that had a law enforcement background, and they talked about, before they went on duty, doing a few dry reps every time before they went on duty. And I was like, because of that reason of, hey, tonight could be the night. And if if that's the case, then in the last few hours, I did some reps of getting my gun out of the holster, of of being able to deactivate level 3 retention, doing that consistently, getting the gun out cleanly and up on target. I'm like, that's a solid strategy. Anyway,
definitely.
What's number 9? Is it
9? Safety. And what I mean by that is, we touched on a little bit, is how safety has changed. Back in the 50s, you can go along on YouTube and see videos, training videos, where people were told to walk around with their fingers on the triggers for it. And even more recently, go along when you talk about that we want to keep our fingers off the trigger and outside the trigger guard until we've made the decision to shoot. Well, a lot of cases we want to go along and change that to say we want to keep our finger on the frame of the gun until we've made the decision to shoot. And the reason for it is we've gone along and psychologically realized that when we say take our finger off the trigger, that we're telling people not to do something, and that's negative learning. We want to tell people what to do, which is a better way of doing it. It's a similar type of advancement in safety when it comes to, we've all heard the term ceasefire. Well, a lot of ranges have progressed to stop, because what do we say when people are going to start shooting? We go along and say commence fire, and then we say ceasefire. Well, when we have people with different hearing abilities, maybe some amplified, electronic ears, people that may not have English as their primary language, all these different types of students, we want to give them very clear commands of saying, okay, commence firing, but then stop. Stop is, a one word, doesn't sound like the other one, versus saying ceasefire. Now, still, we want to go along and make sure anybody on the range realizes that they can go and, yell stop for it, or but it's those little things where safety has changed just in the last, I would say, 5 years. With the way I teach classes, to make sure I'm giving people a positive learning experience, and saying, put finger on the frame versus telling them to take it off the trigger, and then also go along and start using stop versus going along and using ceasefire for it. And those are just two examples where staying up on safety and what can be small changes make a big difference for you when you're teaching the class.
Stop is pretty universally understood. That's hard to argue with. For most countries, like, even if English isn't their first language, most people understand stop. So I like that as an example. That's good. Cool, great, excellent. That was number 9. Okay. And
number 10, we'll wrap this up, because
do we do a drum roll for this, or what? This is pretty epic. Anyway, all right, what do we got?
Medical knowledge. Now, and I bring this up because NRA, USCCA, all these different certification programs are good. They teach you how to teach a good pistol course. But keeping one thing in mind, when you're on a range, when you're in a classroom and you've got diverse backgrounds, you're going to have medical issues for it. I'm not saying people are going to get shot all the time. I'm saying you're out on the range, and we were just talking about somebody getting a little exhausted. What happens if it goes from, just basic, drinking a little water, to where they all of a sudden start having heat exhaustion? Do you know that? Do you know how to identify somebody who it might be going into diabetic shock? Because they're, again, you've been out there, you've been running around. They haven't looked at their blood sugar level. They might not realize that it's crashing on them. And that's one I bring up a lot of times. My brother's diabetic, and there's been times when he's acted like he's completely drunk. We knew he wasn't drunk, but it's like, hold on a minute, get him some an orange, an apple, some sugar to get in the system to get him balanced again. And those are things that, as an instructor, we know how to go along, make sure the fingers are on the trigger properly, the sights are lined up, but we also need to go along and be ready to help our students, because heart attacks, strokes, heat exhaustion, just somebody falling down, twisting an ankle, slide bite, those are very simple things we want to be prepared for. And then if something really terrible happens and somebody gets shot, or somebody goes along, catches a ricochet off a piece of steel, we've got to have that trauma medicine knowledge of how do we go along and keep that person, safe until the ambulance arrives, until the professionals arrive. And that's where I go along, encourage instructors to take Stop the Bleed program, and maybe even offer their students to Stop the Bleed course, so they understand how to do things. Because especially when we're talking about concealed carry, if we're in that terrible situation, and with our family especially, we may need to know how to go along and apply a tourniquet, because in those kind of situations, when there's firearms involved, paramedics don't run in first. It's the police that run in first, and then they go along calling the paramedics once the scene is safe. And sometimes watching TV shows and TV dramas, we don't realize that there is a distinct waiting until the police say everything's safe before the paramedics get in there. And you might have people, maybe even yourself, that you've got to put a tourniquet on, or know how to go along and bandage something up with a compression bandage for in order to keep them going until professional help can arrive.
Yeah, very solid advice. It's not only the knowledge. So what I would add to that is not only having the knowledge of recognizing symptoms of different things. I mean, do you remember that guy we had in the Guardian Pistol class several years ago in Cincinnati? He
Mhm.
basically, like, he got overheated and
He
probably
was
dehydrated.
exhausted. Mhm.
Yeah, like, he just shut down and, like, he sat and left early, I think, that day, and then he didn't show up the next day, and we were
Didn't
all
call
worried. We're
either.
like, "Did he die in the hotel room last night?" Like, just trying to get a hold of him, like, I would say that's probably another tip for an instructor, a bonus tip, like, hey, care for your students, make sure that
Mhm.
that they're accounted for, things like that. I've had over the years a couple of times students that, like, we had one last year in a class, very similar situation. She was a little bit older, and not in, as good a health as you'd probably want to be, and it was a hot day. Actually, it was a 3-day course there, but it was the first day, and she just crashed, and she was good about it. She recognized, she's like, yeah, I'm not doing well, I need to take a break. And she took a break. I checked on her during lunch. She's like, I'm gonna go back to the hotel. Okay, cool. And then I made sure to follow up with her that night, like, hey, how you feeling, how you doing, you still alive, are you coming
Mhm.
back tomorrow? She's like, no, I'm not, that kind of thing. And so just making sure that we take care of our students and have their best interests at heart, but also, in addition to, again, having the knowledge of how to deal with medical situations and emergencies, but make sure you have a solid medical plan.
Mhm.
Make sure you know how, like, that in advance. I mean, things like, okay, where is the nearest trauma center that can
Mhm.
handle anything that you need to, like, you get, because you have to plan for the worst. So where's the nearest trauma center? What's response time likely to be for where you're teaching, so that you can make, hey, I've been on ranges where the hospital's right around the corner, dang near, it's minutes away, and ambulance response is super quick. I've been on ranges where it's 45 minutes, for best case scenario for them to respond. And in some of those cases, they might be sending a life flight helicopter. Okay, so then where are they going to, like, I have to make sure they have a safe place to land, or they're not going to land. Right? Where
Mhm.
where is that designated helicopter landing zone? Okay, how do I communicate things like that? How do I, uh, uh, and then things like, what's the actual location information for where you are, both in terms of the address, but also uh, geo coordinates,
Mhm.
like latitude, longitude, or a geocode of some kind that, like, you can provide, that gives very specific information about how to get to where you are. All these things need to be thought of and planned for ahead of time. I put together a medical plan for every class I teach. Now, a lot of instructors are going to teach, at the same range every time, and so they can just have one plan and keep that in their binder. I do a unique plan for every location, every class I teach, because it's different and unique for everywhere I go. And so I research those things ahead of time. I work with class hosts or the range to you get certain information, if I, because I'm not maybe familiar with that particular area. But having that ahead of time and making sure you have a plan in place. And I communicate that with students, one, so that they can be also effective participants in that plan, but also to give them confidence that, hey, I take your safety and your lives very seriously. I have a plan in place. This is what
Mhm.
it is. So they know that. So that's like, okay, this instructor's got his stuff together, and I can trust him.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind too, hopefully it doesn't happen very often, but it might actually happen to you as the instructor. And there again, you don't want your students sitting around going along saying, "Hey Riley, what's the address here? Because I got 911 on the call right now." And
Yep.
that's not the time if you've got it written out ahead of time. And
Yep.
I've got laminated sheets that I have in my trauma bag that I show people that if something happens to me, here's everything you need to do. It's already thought out. Here's one thing, and you brought up, it's kind of unique in my area, but I'm sure it's probably not completely unique with everybody who's listening. Is I actually have the direct dispatch number
Mm.
on it, and the reason I do that is because the range where we shoot at a lot of times, we're only a quarter mile away from Kentucky, but we're in
Hmm.
Indiana, and we're about a half mile over the county border between two counties, and we're only a couple miles from Ohio too. All of a sudden, when
Hmm.
you go along, think about that. If you've ever just dialed 911 of those locations, sometimes you don't get the dispatch center you want to, and when time is of the essence, you want to be able to go along, call them up, know that you're talking to the right people, give them the coordinates or give them what actions you need them to do, and follow up with it, because again, you don't have a whole lot of time to think, and that's where having the plan ahead of time can really help you and help your students, feel confident that you've got a plan.
Yeah. That's a great point right there. And the plan, yeah, I put together that unique plan for every location class that I go and teach, and I have a specific place that I keep that plan. It's a document. By the way, it's another benefit. We're getting close to wrapping this up, and our sponsor of today's episode is Firearm Trainers Association. Protect or FTAprotect.com. And one of the resources they provide member instructors on their website is a medical plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I use
fill
that
it out and then ready to go.
I use that exact document. I fill it out and I print it out every class, fill it out manually. And then that document, that's what I go over it together with the students. And then I show them this. I typically, for a lot of my classes, I'm traveling. And so I go with a Pelican case. I have my range bag inside that Pelican case. I put that plan on top of it. And I say, look, you lift up that Pelican case lid, that plan will be sitting right there. So if there's an emergency, anybody can grab that. And I usually have a primary and a secondary communications person that a member of the class. Okay, who here is comfortable, confident, has maybe experience with, making, so I've had, all law enforcement officers, for instance. I've had dispatchers in classes before. And so it's like, yeah, you are perfect for being a communications person because you know how to communicate that information very well, very concisely. And then it's like, so then you got a primary and a secondary in case that person's the one that's injured to make the call. I'm not, as an instructor, making that call because I'm going to be probably focused on other things. And so I make those assignments, those people's names and information is written down on that plan. And again, that plan is tucked away in a specific spot that everybody knows where to find it so that it can be located. And it's got the address and latitude, longitude, coordinates, and all that on that plan. So anyway, it's a great resource that FTA provides to their members. Well, this has been fun to talk through this stuff with you, fellow instructor. Rob, thank you so much for your time this evening. I know it's late for you. You're in Eastern time zone. So thank you for doing this with me. Do you have any final words or bonus tips to leave us with?
All what I would go along and leave it with is, these are our top 10 and they're going to change tomorrow. And the biggest thing with instructor is to go along and be flexible and figure out what works for you and what you can do to be the best for your students. Because let's put it this way, none of us would want to go to an instructor that was teaching us how to shoot the old single action revolvers because it was, old technology. But at the same time, apply that today when it gets to, medical knowledge, safety knowledge, adult learning. We know better ways of doing it. So stay up with it. Improve yourself and improve your students the best you can.
Yeah, because ultimately, I think one of the reasons why most of us get into the profession of teaching, instructing, coaching, whatever, is we have a desire and an interest and a love for teaching and sharing information and knowledge with others. And so ultimately, I would hope that we all also just want the best for those we are teaching. So
agreed.
It's been a fun episode, Rob. Thank you so much. Mentioned FTA as an episode sponsor again as we're wrapping it up, FTAprotect.com. Again, our other sponsor of today's episode was the Barrel Block Instructor Bundle on concealedcarry.com. For those of you who'd like to get your hand on a nice set of barrel blocks in pretty much every caliber, check it out, Barrel Block Instructor Bundle. And that's pretty much it for me here. So thanks again for your time, Rob. Perhaps we should do it again and not have it be, so many years in between episodes.
That sounds good. I'm always open. And if anybody wants to check out my podcast, go to the Firearm Trainer Podcast.com and you can see all 300 plus episodes that we have out there on lots of different topics.
Fantastic episodes, fantastic podcast. You've had a lot of awesome guests over the years, many world-class instructors and folks that you can learn from. So yes. And I'm glad you remembered to plug it. I mentioned the beginning, Firearm Trainers Podcast. That is, when we introduced this podcast as, being part of the concealedcarry.com network, Well, that network means there's more than just the Concealed Carry Podcast. Firearm Trainers Podcast is another one of those member or network podcasts. So thanks for plugging that one more time. So, folks, go check out Rob. Go check out the Firearm Trainers Podcast. Go check out their sponsors. And if you have any questions or want to hit us up, drop a line. Just email us at podcast@concealedcarry.com. That's the way to reach us here. So until next time, a reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true.